The night itself seemed ordinary, in the quiet way childhood memories often begin. Nothing about it hinted that it would become one of those moments that refuses to fade with time, the kind that sits at the back of your mind long after the house has gone silent. I was about 12 years old, still young enough to feel safe in the routines of our home, but old enough to notice when something didn't quite feel right. It was late evening, the kind of hour when the air inside the house felt warm and heavy, when the outside world had already settled into darkness and the lights inside created small islands of comfort in every room. My dad was sitting on the edge of his bed, talking to me about something I can't even remember now. Maybe it was school, maybe it was chores, or maybe it was one of those long conversations parents start when they want to explain something important. His voice was calm and steady, the familiar tone that always made everything feel normal. I sat on the floor near the dresser, leaning against the wall, half listening and half letting my mind wander the way kids do. The bedroom light was on, casting a soft yellow glow across the room. It didn't reach all the way into the closet, though. The closet door was open just enough that darkness pooled inside it like a shadow that refused to move. But even with the lights off in there, we could still see movement. My mom was inside the closet. At least, that's what it looked like. She stood just beyond the doorway, her figure partially hidden by hanging clothes, and the dim outline of shelves stacked with folded shirts and blankets. Her back was turned toward us, and she was quietly folding clothes, one piece at a time, the way she always did. The faint rustling of fabric could be heard every few seconds. The movement was slow and methodical, almost soothing. Nothing about it seemed strange at first. My mom always kept her hair tied up in a bun, especially when she was doing housework, and the silhouette in the closet had the same shape, the same posture, the same familiar rhythm of folding and stacking clothes. Every once in a while her arms lifted slightly as she placed another shirt onto the shelf. From where I sat, I could clearly see the outline of her shoulders and the bun at the back of her head. The dim light from the bedroom stretched just far enough to paint her figure in soft gray shadows. My dad noticed her too. In the middle of our conversation, he casually turned his head toward the closet and spoke in that everyday tone people use when they assume someone is already listening. "Hey," he said, asking her something simple. I don't remember the exact question, only that it sounded normal, like something he had probably asked 100 times before. The figure in the closet didn't answer. That didn't seem unusual right away. Sometimes my mom would be focused on what she was doing and wouldn't hear right away, especially if she was moving clothes around. My dad kept talking to me for another moment, then glanced back again. She was still there, still folding clothes, still facing away from us. He called her name again, a little louder this time, expecting some kind of response. Maybe just a quick, "Yeah," or "Hold on." Nothing came back. The only thing we heard was the quiet rustle of fabric moving through someone's hands. I remember noticing how steady the movement was. There was no pause, no hesitation, just that same slow folding motion repeating over and over. My dad shifted slightly on the bed, his voice carrying a hint of confusion now. He called her name again. Still nothing. At that point I glanced toward the closet more carefully, the way you do when you start trying to figure out why something doesn't make sense. She hadn't turned around. Not even once. Most people would look over their shoulder if someone called their name 3 times. But the figure in the closet just kept moving, folding clothes in the exact same slow rhythm. The air in the room began to feel different somehow. Not colder exactly, but heavier, like something had quietly settled into the space without anyone noticing. My dad raised his voice slightly. "Did you hear me?" The tone was sharper now, the edge of mild irritation creeping in. Still the same motion in the closet. Still no reply. I remember watching that silhouette more closely, my eyes tracing the outline of the bun on her head, the slope of her shoulders, the way her arms lifted and lowered. It looked exactly like my mom. There was no doubt about that. Every detail matched. My dad let out a small breath, the kind people do when they think someone is ignoring them on purpose. Now he was starting to get annoyed. He leaned forward a bit and called her name again, louder than before. The sound of his voice filled the room and bounced off the walls, sharp enough that anyone in the closet should have reacted. But the figure didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him in any way, just the same steady folding. At that moment, something about the whole situation started to bother me, though I couldn't explain why. It wasn't fear yet, not really, just a strange sense that the moment was stretching longer than it should. My dad stood up from the bed. The mattress creaked slightly under his weight, the sound cutting through the quiet room. He took a step closer to the closet and called her name again, this time with the volume of someone who was definitely expecting an answer. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Even then, the figure didn't react. The shoulders never shifted, the head never turned. The bun remained perfectly still at the back of the silhouette. Only the arms moved, folding another piece of clothing. I remember feeling the oddest sense that something was wrong in a way I couldn't describe. Everything looked right. Everything looked normal. But the silence felt unnatural. My dad rubbed the back of his neck, clearly confused now. He looked back at me briefly, almost as if silently asking if I was seeing the same thing he was. I nodded slightly without realizing it, because I was. We both were. And as the seconds stretched on, with the dim outline of my mother still standing there, in the closet folding clothes, in complete silence, neither of us yet realized that the real reason she hadn't answered was because the person we were looking at wasn't actually her at all. My dad's patience finally began to crack. At first, his voice had only carried mild annoyance, the kind that comes when someone thinks they're being ignored on purpose. But now there was something sharper behind it. The room had grown strangely tense, the silence between his calls stretching longer each time. The figure in the closet still stood with her back toward us, arms moving slowly as she folded clothes one after another. "Did you hear me?" he said again, louder this time. No answer. The sound of his voice seemed to sink into the room and disappear. The house itself felt quiet in a way that made every small noise stand out. I could hear the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath my dad's feet as he shifted his weight. I could hear the soft rustling of fabric from inside the closet. But the person in there never spoke. It was strange, because my mom was never the type to ignore someone calling her name repeatedly. Even if she was busy, she would usually respond with something quick, something simple like, "Just a minute," or "What?" But this time there was nothing, no sigh, no reply. Not even a small movement to show she had heard him. My dad stepped a little closer toward the closet, clearly confused now. His voice rose another level. "Hey, I've been talking to you." The words bounced off the bedroom walls, louder than before. I remember feeling a strange knot form in my stomach, the kind that comes when a situation suddenly feels uncomfortable, but you don't yet understand why. I looked toward the closet again, focusing more carefully on the figure standing there. She looked exactly like my mom. The bun on the back of her head was unmistakable. My mom almost always wore her hair that way when she was doing housework. The outline of her shoulders and arms matched perfectly too. Even the way she moved felt familiar, folding clothes with slow, practiced motions. And yet something felt off. Maybe it was the way she never turned her head. Not even slightly. Most people would glance back if someone raised their voice that much. But this figure stayed completely facing the shelves, completely silent. My dad called her name again, louder than before, the frustration now clear in his tone. Still nothing. The strange part was that the folding never stopped. The arms continued moving steadily, as if whoever was standing there hadn't heard a single word. Shirt after shirt seemed to pass through those hands, and onto the shelf. The moment stretched uncomfortably. I looked at my dad, and he looked back at me briefly. His expression had changed. The irritation was still there, but now it was mixed with confusion. "Why isn't she answering?" he muttered under his breath. Neither of us had an explanation. He raised his voice again, practically yelling now.
"Hey! I'm talking to you."
The words were loud enough that they should have startled anyone in the room. They should have caused some reaction, even if it was just a quick turn of the head. But the figure in the closet never reacted. Not a flinch. Not a pause. Just the same quiet folding motion continuing in the dim shadow of the closet, while the room around us filled with a silence that suddenly felt far too heavy for something so ordinary to be happening. The tension in the room had started to feel almost physical, like something invisible pressing down on both of us. My dad stood there staring toward the closet, his brows slightly pulled together, clearly trying to make sense of why my mom wouldn't respond. I could tell he was getting more irritated, but there was also confusion in his expression now. It wasn't normal for her to ignore him like that. I kept watching the figure in the closet. The movement never stopped. Whoever, or whatever, was standing there continued folding clothes with slow, careful motions. A shirt would lift slightly in the dim light, then disappear into the stack on the shelf. Another piece of clothing would follow. The rhythm stayed steady, almost mechanical. My dad let out a frustrated breath and shook his head. "I don't know why she's ignoring me," he said, his voice low but annoyed. Then he raised his voice again and called her name even louder than before. The sound filled the bedroom, sharp and clear, the kind of tone that usually meant someone had finally run out of patience. Still nothing. The figure didn't react at all. It didn't stop folding. It didn't turn around. It didn't even pause for a second. Something about that moment made my skin start to prickle. At 12 years old, I couldn't fully explain why it felt wrong, but I knew it did. I had seen my mom fold laundry countless times before. I knew how she moved, how she would occasionally shift her weight or glance toward whoever was speaking. But this time there was none of that, just that same slow motion repeating again and again. I suddenly felt the urge to get a closer look. Maybe she just hadn't heard him. Maybe she was focused on the clothes and hadn't realized how many times he had called her. That explanation made sense in my head, and it was enough to push me to stand up from the floor. The carpet felt soft under my feet as I rose. My dad noticed me moving but didn't stop me. His attention was still fixed on the closet. I took a few careful steps forward, my eyes never leaving the figure inside. The closer I got, the darker the closet looked. The bedroom light didn't reach very far past the doorway, so the deeper parts of the closet were swallowed by shadow. But the outline of the person standing there was still visible. I could see the bun clearly. I could see the shape of the shoulders. I could see the arms moving as another shirt was folded. For a brief moment, everything felt strangely quiet except for the faint sound of fabric shifting in those hands. I stepped right up to the closet doorway. From that angle, I should have been close enough for her to notice me immediately. If it was really my mom standing there, she would have turned around by now. She would have asked what I was doing or why my dad was yelling. But the figure kept facing the shelves, still folding, still silent. I leaned forward slightly, preparing to step inside the closet so I could get her attention directly. My heart was beating a little faster now, though I still couldn't explain exactly why. Just as I was about to take that step into the darkness of the closet, a completely unexpected sound came from behind me. Footsteps. Soft, quick footsteps approaching the bedroom doorway. Then my mom's voice filled the room, clear and confused. "Why are you yelling my name?" The room felt completely different now. Only seconds earlier, my dad had been frustrated and confused. But now there was something far heavier in the air. Something neither of us knew how to explain. My mom stepped fully into the room, still holding the towel tightly around herself, her damp hair twisted loosely into the familiar bun. She looked from my dad to me, clearly trying to understand why we both looked like we had just seen something impossible. "What's wrong with you two?" she asked. Her voice sounded normal, casual even, but the question seemed to hang in the room unanswered. My dad didn't respond right away. His eyes slowly shifted from her to the closet again, like he was checking to make sure he hadn't imagined it. I followed his gaze instinctively. The closet remained exactly the same, quiet, still, and completely empty. The clothes hung in place without moving. The shelves held their neat stacks. There was no sign that anyone had been standing there just moments ago. My mom frowned slightly, noticing the way both of us kept staring toward the closet. "Why were you yelling for me?" she asked again. My dad finally spoke, but his voice was quieter now, almost cautious. "We thought you were in the closet." She blinked at him in confusion. "I just got out of the shower." The words made my stomach twist even tighter. I had already seen the towel wrapped around her and the water on her shoulders, but hearing her say it out loud made the situation feel even more unreal. My dad rubbed his forehead slowly, as if trying to push away the thought forming in his mind. "You weren't folding clothes in there?" he asked. My mom glanced toward the closet briefly before shaking her head. "No. I've been in the bathroom the whole time." Silence followed her answer. The kind of silence that makes every small sound stand out. The hum of the house, the faint creak of wood somewhere in the hallway, even the quiet rhythm of our breathing. I could feel my heartbeat still racing. My eyes drifted back toward the closet again, almost expecting to see that silhouette reappear in the darkness. But nothing moved. My dad looked down at me. "Did you see her too?" he asked carefully. I nodded immediately. There was no hesitation, no doubt in my mind. I had watched that figure folding clothes for several minutes. I had seen the bun, the shoulders, the arms moving. I had been close enough to step into the closet just seconds before my mom walked into the room. My dad exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with disbelief. He had seen it too. Whatever had been standing there had looked exactly like my mother. Not just similar, exactly the same. The same posture, the same hair, the same movements. It had been so convincing that neither of us questioned it at first. My mom studied both of us carefully, the confusion on her face slowly turning into unease as she realized we were serious. "You're messing with me, right?" she said quietly. Neither of us answered, because, deep down, both my dad and I knew the same thing. Whatever we had been watching in that closet, it wasn't my mom.